Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are excited to be welcoming author, educator, and preservation tradesperson Steve Jordan, who in just a few moments will be discussing his book along with our panelists. I want to thank our sponsor, the Peggy N. and Roger G. Gary Charitable Trust, who underwrite all of our Preservation Book Club programming. And now for the reason we're all here tonight, we are going to be talking about the Historic House Handbook, a sensitive guide for old house living. It's written by noted old house expert Steve Jordan. Steve's a preservation educator, a window restoration craftsman. He's been in the old house repair and restoration business for 40 years and is the author of other books such as the Window Sash Bible and Storm Windows, a comprehensive guide to wood combination, aluminum, and interior storm windows. His goal is to prevent the thoughtless destruction of historic windows by bringing to light their enduring, yet often overlooked qualities as compared to the short-term lives of modern replacement windows. And in 2022, Steve received an Excellence in Historic Preservation Award from the League in recognition of his many contributions to the field. So Steve, I'm really excited for tonight's program. Steve originally wrote this book along with our colleagues and my former employer, the Landmark Society of Western New York, in 1995 under the title Rehab Rochester. And this updated version, it's a project that's near and dear to me. During my 13 years at Landmark, we would kind of jealously hoard the last few precious hard copies that we had of that original Rehab Rochester book. And when we wanted to share it with people, we'd have to send them a link to our website where we had a very poorly scanned version of the book. So this is really exciting to have an updated copy that people can hold in their hot little hands now. And this was one of the many projects too that I left for my former colleagues at Landmark Society, like Megan Clem, who we'll hear from next, to take over the finish line. So really excited for tonight's discussion. Our other panelists joining us tonight are Bradley Huber. Brad is a middle school reading teacher with an active interest in historic preservation, urban design, and a deep affection for street trees. He and his dog Crumb live in a small Rochester bungalow that he restored himself, a project that caught the attention of This Old House magazine, HGTV, and others. Eager to rescue another piece of history, Brad searched high and low until he discovered Silver Lake, a former Victorian-era Methodist camp where he and his boyfriend Daniel Cantor restored and saved an 1878 stick-style cottage. You'll get to see some pictures of that. And Ellen Olah is a hands-on old house owner restoring her late 19th century Queen Anne home in Rochester's East Ave Preservation District. Over the years, she's taken on everything from restoring original window sashes to scraping and painting cedar clapboards, often working right alongside contractors. If there's scaffolding up, chances are you'll find Ellen on it. And then last but not least, Megan Clem is the Director of Preservation Services at the Landmark Society of Western New York. In that role, she leads the organization's advocacy initiatives, provides preservation-related technical guidance to property owners, and undertakes preservation consulting projects like National Register nominations, historic resource surveys, and tax credit applications. She previously worked as a state and federal tax credit reviewer for the Maryland Historical Trust and as an interior designer and preservation specialist at a preservation architecture firm. So finally, with that, I will turn it over to Megan Clem with the Landmark Society of Western New York. And again, I want to thank our sponsor, the Peggy N. and Roger G. Gary Charitable Trust.
All right, well, welcome everyone. I'm very excited that you have all decided to join this webinar tonight. I think you're in for a real treat to hear from all of our panelists. Just to give you a little quick background, if you're not familiar with the Landmark Society of Western New York, we are a regional nonprofit preservation organization. We're based in Rochester, but we work across the Finger Lakes and Genesee Valley regions, so kind of Western-ish New York. And Caitlin read my bio, so you know kind of what we do here at the Landmark Society. And we work almost on a daily basis with our colleagues at the Preservation League of New York State. So just a little background into why we're talking about this book this evening. As Caitlin mentioned, about 30 years ago, the Landmark Society partnered with Steve Jordan to write this Rehab Rochester book that you can see what it looked like, although no longer in print. And it was a guide on old house repair and maintenance. And then several years ago, our organization and some of our friends realized that this book really needed an update. Obviously, it was 30 years old, so there's new things that have happened in the preservation field since then. Um, and so, with partnering with Steve once again, he took on the task of updating Rehab Rochester. And now we have, if I can get it to change, we have updated the book, and it resulted with some new additions to the book because more things have become historic over the past 30 years. As well as edits to prior guidance that might not be as relevant anymore. And also, as you can see here, a brand new cover book to the book and a brand new title. So now we have our Historic House Handbook, a sensitive guide for old house living. And we're very thrilled to finally have this published and out to the public so people can read it and really make use of the guidance within it. And so with that, I would like, and I have the pleasure to turn this over to Steve Jordan, who I'm sure you're all waiting to hear from tonight. So Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Megan. And Caitlin, I appreciate the league allowing us to do this. My background has always been in the traditional trades, and those are the trades that are important to make historic preservation possible. And when I came to the Landmark Society, which was a long time ago, 35 years almost ago, they had a small house inspection program, but I wanted it to grow. And eventually it did grow enough till we introduced a fee-based program, which at that time was successful, and we were very busy at it. But it took a lot, it took a lot of work to get there. I had a background in the trades, as I said. I had a preservation education, but I didn't know about all the trades. And of course, I still don't know about all the trades. And I realized that I had a lot to learn. So I began weekly trips over to Rundell Library here in the city and would bring home arms full of books. And I studied and read about, or scanned books, about roofing and flashing and masonry and carpentry. I also stopped on job sites to meet contractors and individuals who were doing the work. I climbed the scaffold to meet them. I met contractors at bars on Friday just to get to know them, find out what they were doing. What the Landmark Society had been doing, and it was prior to my time there, it was Dorothy Victor and Ted Bartlett, was to write a column called House Notes in our Cornerstone newsletter. And what I wanted to do was for each edition of House Notes to discuss a topic that was important to old house owners. And it would be a one-page document that if someone called and said, I need gutters, who do I get to put them on, and what kind of gutters do I need? Then I would have a directive, a house note about gutters. I believe the name of the house note about gutters was called Gutter Talk, and went on to write house notes about roofs and roof flashing and gutters and wet basements, plaster repair, chimney repointing, hiring contractors, and living in historic preservation districts. All these things were to answer the phone calls that came in daily, phone calls that we were hard pressed to answer because so many were coming in at that time. What eventually we did was compile these house notes in an organized fashion into our book, Rehab Rochester, in 1995. Rehab Rochester was published. It was a free use book because it had a lot of government grants, and so it was sent around the state. It was in libraries all over the state, even in the state prisons. And I had a lot of interesting requests and letters out of some of the state prisons. You know, prisoners have a lot of time on their hands. But over the last 25 years, I'll say that I met someone almost weekly or bi-weekly who would ask me, do you still have a copy of that? I'd like to have a new copy of that. Or when are you going to do a new edition of that? I sure would like to see a new edition. And I have several friends and people from the Landmark Society and other places around town who never let that go. You got to do it. You got to do it. And so finally, we decided we'd do it. And I would sit down and rewrite the book. And the first thing that, well, I hadn't read the book in 30 years. And when I sat down and read the old book, I was shocked how outdated it was. Materials had changed. A lot of materials that were newly on the market had gone bad. There were a lot of new materials that we were hopeful about. There were new techniques. There were new tools. And as one of the startling things about reading the Rehab Rochester, I'll just say that on one page in the book, isn't this quaint? It said, never attach your television antenna to your chimney, see? And when I read that, I thought, oh, how antiquated this book is. We got to start over again. And so we did. And I think it took me about a year. I'm not the sole author of this, although my name is on there. Christopher Brand at Barrow Architecture was a leading contributor, as was Jerry Ludwig, who still does the house notes for the Landmark Society and used to have his own column in the local newspaper. But every chapter, whether it's about roofs or carpentry or working with City Hall, we reached out to the people who were the best in their field to either offer suggestions that we could write more about or add to the book, or we had them edit what we had already written. So as the book went out, we felt comfortable that we were not leading anyone astray. Another thing that we did is that we added new house styles. Obviously, in 30 years, styles that we didn't think much about then have become historic. They meet the 50-year rule. And so we added information about ranch houses. And in this picture, you'll see, well, ranch houses and split levels, mid-century modern and contemporary, which are really, really popular architectural styles today. Every realtor I know will tell me, will say that that's the most popular style out there for new home buyers. The slide before that showed a longhouse, which was the first, well, it was the Haudenosaunee way of building homes, and we didn't have that in the first book, and I always thought that I'd made an omission not putting that in there. So we added that too. This book is not comprehensive in that it tells you everything about every aspect of your house, but it does tell you how to get started on a successful rehab, repair, or restoration. We've also included at the end of every chapter both written and online sources that are in depth, so that if you are interested in maybe plastering your own walls, or if you want to know everything about roofs and roof flashing, the sources are there for you to go to and have a successful job. The Historic House Handbook supports our preservation cause here in Rochester. It aids confused homeowners. It potentially saves money, keeps you from doing the wrong thing. It helps avoid the anguish of a job gone wrong, I should say. When we hope you'll all take a look at it. To end my sort of brief talk, I know this is probably not long enough. There'll be plenty of time for others and for questions. I have had an increasing interest in the traditional trades over the last few years. And when people can't find a tradesperson and they don't know where to turn to, this book, that's another reason we wrote the book. Okay. If you just don't know who does what or where to go, this book will lead you in the right direction. I hope that all of you listening today, if you are interested in old houses, and you wouldn't be listening if you weren't. I hope that you will let us know if you know of new people going into the trades that are maybe should be on our Landmark Society contractor list or on the list in your neighborhood, wherever you may be across the state. We hope that you'll encourage young people to go into the trades. There's a great living to be made. We hope that you'll all buy our book, maybe give it away for Christmas presents. And that's what I have. So take it away, next person, okay?
I think that's me. So, I have I use Steve's book a number of times in the rehabilitation and restoration of both properties. So I originally purchased a 1930 sort of craftsman style bungalow in Rochester in 2011. And at the time I didn't really know what to do, and often was calling in contractors for help from time to time and having trouble explaining to the contractors how to. I sort of understood the aesthetic of what I wanted, but not necessarily the rationale behind what the reason was behind that aesthetic. And so having a book, I have the old copy here, like this was really helpful for me as a tool, not only to ground myself in the work that I needed to do and also understand the vocabulary terms that were necessary to communicate this idea, but then if I did call a contractor into my project, I was often able to reference what was written in the book and show the contractor what exactly it is that I'm looking for, rather than trying to describe it. So that was helpful for me in the bungalow, but it was also helpful for me in the cottage. So Caitlin has these pictures up of the latest endeavor, which was the 1878 cottage down at the Silver Lake Institute. Particularly important in this restoration was pulling off of this asphalt brick siding and restoring or reimagining what those railings would look like. And the book has a lot of information about how to do porch railings right. And in this image here, you're seeing those porch railings, and what's really important is the height of the porch railings. And how do you meet the height how do you keep a low porch railing but still meet modern code? So what we did was we added a metal pipe over the top of that, which gave me the code specific height that I needed without, as you can see on the before pictures, they're too high. They look almost like a jail cell. And that was, like tips and tricks that I got from this book that helped me get the type of product that I was looking for. And that's evident throughout all the pictures. I think maybe Caitlin, you can kind of shuffle through them. In the interior of the house, we used as much as we could that was old, repurposing the mantles and really thinking really carefully and critically about what choices we were making inside each of the rooms. The dining room, right? Bringing back the wooden floors, painting what was there. I think there's a photograph of the kitchen in that stack somewhere. Yeah. And using thoughts, there's like a whole section in here about appropriate kitchen cabinetry. And while this kitchen probably would have never been quote unquote fitted with cabinets that ran from wall to wall, it was probably more furniture. I did need to make the space work for me today, and it's a tiny kitchen and it has to do a lot of work. So I did install wall-to-wall cabinetry, but I did it in a way using tips from the book that made it sensitive to the time period that perhaps if it did have a fitted kitchen, it would have looked something like this with the inset cabinet, the cabinet doors, and trying to figure out how we could do that. Putting on a countertop that maybe could have possibly been there at the time when those are just oak boards where we sort of biscuit joined them together. And this book was incredibly helpful for me in accomplishing that goal. Here you have the bedroom, and you can see we went through great lengths to save the ceiling. We went through a number of things not to tear out more things than we needed. There's a good picture of the windows here. So those were all taken out one by one, stripped, back bedded, glass put back in, reglazed. It was it was not an easy job, but I think that it gave great dividends in in the look that we got at the end, and making sure that the house still looks something like maybe it could have in 1878 while still being comfortable for modern amenities.
Okay. So I'm sort of became a reluctant home rehab person. I was looking for a house over 20 years ago, and when I walked into this house and saw the foyer, which you're seeing right now, that's the thing that sold me on this house. I knew nothing about old houses. I knew nothing about what I was getting myself into. And well, this is what the house looked like when I first bought it. And I knew it needed a roof, and I knew I needed painting. And yet I didn't know that I was living in a preservation district. So a bunch of things had to happen, and I didn't know where to start. I lived in the house probably a year or two before I had knowledge of the Landmark Society, and they were doing a preservation conference. And at that time, they had a tract for residential people. And so I went and I paid money to go to that, and I met Steve Jordan. This happens to be a picture of my house from last year that you're looking at after doing some work. Steve sort of took me under his wing and told me an overwhelming amount of information about things that I needed to do to my house. He came and looked at it, and he was able to put me in contact with some contractors, and eventually I had the roof done. But then I was stuck on doing the painting. There was no one that I could find who was going to do the painting the way I needed it done. So I ended up just taking it on myself, not because I wanted to, but because there really wasn't any choice at the time. So this is kind of what it looks like now. That was the tower. This is today's remodeling still. Steve really took me under his wing, and here he is showing up on project here, where you can see scraping the paint down to the bare wood, and it'll be sanded down and rehabbed. He gave me some very good advice at the time, which I wish I had taken, which was to put myself on a 10-year plan to restore the windows. There's 57 windows in the house, and they have wooden storms, and they have wooden screens. And I'm still working on windows today, with and without Steve's help too. So here's a view of the repair of the tower, but you can see right next to it, I hadn't moved on to the window yet, or the side of the house yet. It gives you an idea of kind of the condition I was working with of the house at the time. Here's like a before picture of some of the detail with the house. Here's the mid-restoration after oiling everything. Oops, I think I seem to have lost the finished picture. Sorry, wait, it's after this one. I seem to have missed it. Okay, well, here's the project I'm working on right now, which is the back door. The storm door, as you can see, was pitted from a dog that had scratched the whole back door. We had taken all the paint off, but you can see all the holes. So I had to fill it all in with epoxy and sanded it out. That's after it's primed, and now it's hanging right now, primed, ready for paint to go onto it. All the work that I've been doing on my house, though, Here's Steve helping me on my house. All the work that I've been doing on my house has been helped by using a New York State historic homeownership rehab credit, where you can get up to 20% back on, or you get 20% back of what you've spent if you use a minimum of $5,000 worth of expenses. So having the roof done, I had a great deal of money returned to me. And then over the years, working on the windows and um, working on the outside has really paid off by going ahead and using that credit. But without Steve helping and guiding me, and without his books, I use his Window Sash Bible book, I use his Rehab Rochester book. They've all, and using the Landmark Society's contact list for different contractors. Without having this network of materials and people, I wouldn't be able to do the stuff that I do on my house. And it's all because I bought an old house, not because I had any designs on becoming someone who was an old house person. But by default, I became one. Thanks, Steve. I think that's it for me.
Great, thank you. If everyone can, all our panelists can come back on camera. We've got some questions coming in the Q&A, but to start us off, Steve, you kind of touched on this in the beginning, but can you talk a little bit more about how you envision people using this book? Like, do you imagine a homeowner buying their first old house, sitting down and reading it cover to cover, or kind of like picking it up as like a reference guide when something pops up? How did you envision this as a resource for homeowners?
I certainly don't envision anyone reading it cover to cover. Even I don't want to do that again. I think it's a reference book. So for example, here's a good example. You decide that you would like your house to be more energy efficient. And as we all know, we're bombarded with various contractors and vendors and different techniques and materials to insulate, ventilate our houses. So you might go to that chapter and read what my recommendations are. What are the materials that we're using in this area, and how are those materials chosen for our climate, our zone? And I'd like to just say this. Last week, a contractor called me, a roofer friend of mine, and said, I need you. It was 8:30 in the morning, and I don't do early morning anymore. And he said, I need you to come to my job now, because I'm closing it up. And I said, okay, and I put on sweatpants and drove 6 or 8 miles to his job, and I climbed the roof, and he showed me where he was taking slates off a roof to make a repair, but everything under that roof was rotten. Even the rafters were rotten. The sheathing was rotten, and underneath that sheathing was closed cell spray foam. So what had happened is that water had gotten trapped between the closed cell foam and the roof sheathing, and rotted everything on the roof. It was a complete and total disaster. We've told people not to use that in an old house. And we talk about it in a book that it's a terrible idea. And so, if you were to pick up the book, and I don't know what to do, this man was here today and he said, I have to spray foam my attic. Well, immediately you would see in the book that maybe that's not a good idea for an old house, or maybe it's not a good idea for a person who is not intimately involved with how old houses work. Okay.
No, that's great. Megan, so the Landmark Society of Western New York has published this book, but is it a resource? Like, is it relevant to people outside of the Rochester area?
Yes, I would say so. I think that was the intent of this update. I think even Rehab Rochester could have been used in similar climates. So I think we kind of look at this as a relevant resource in like the northeastern United States in a way. Um, but yes, our intent is that it would be a relevant resource for anybody kind of in a similar climate. And while there are in the book some references that are specific to Rochester, really this book, and maybe someday we'll be able to do this, kind of take this book. But it's useful, I think, like I said, to anyone who's kind of in the Northeast climate could use this book. And I think that was a big reason behind the rename of this update, to not call it Rehab Rochester anymore, because we wanted people outside of the Rochester area to know that this book is still relevant and useful for them.
Brad and Ellen, you mentioned, you know, that you didn't go into this as a you didn't start out as like a preservationist or have any professional preservation background. And you both have, you know, day jobs and other areas of expertise. So I'm curious, can you talk about like what got you turned on to becoming kind of an obsessive old house, like rehab restorationist? What was your inspiration? Was it your houses themselves, or like how did you come up with this ethos of like you really wanted to honor the character and details of your houses?
I think for me, I think I wanted the outside to reflect what was on the inside. You know, the outside was starting to decay, and I knew that unless I really took this down to the bare wood and started working on this, that the outside would just fall apart and it would become one of those vinyl sided houses that you see everywhere. So I would have preferred originally if I could have paid someone to do it, but I just couldn't find someone who was willing to do it for a reasonable amount of money. And now I understand why, because it's not a reasonable job.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Alan. Like, there was nobody that I could hire that was going to do it for the budget that I had available. And so I was either going to have to do it myself, or I was going to have to hire a contractor who may or may not would not have been an expert in this type of work, and then police them through the entire job.
Yes.
So so in either event, I had to be an informed person, whether I was an informed consumer or an informed do-it-yourselfer. The thing that was constant was I had to be informed. And so using a book like this was helpful because in either case it was helpful. It gave me the information that I needed to have to be successful. I think also in terms of like why, there's a lot of people, it takes all kinds of people around the world to make things happen, right? And, like I think I can walk past any old house and I don't know. I just don't see if it's an old house and it's got good bones. I'm immediately looking past it. I'm immediately thinking, oh, if I could just get my hands on that. And that's what I saw in both houses is I saw, oh, I can see the bones. I can see all these things. If I could just have my hands on that. And that's not true for all things, it's not true for things that I don't have interest in. And these two projects were just, I just really wanted to get into them and show other people what maybe they're missing. And people come by the houses now and they say, oh my gosh, it's so amazing. And I'm like, well, I saw this the whole time. I don't know what you guys were missing. Like I could see it right there.
Yeah, not everyone has that vision. So, DIYing an old house rehab is both like tedious, but also like really overwhelming, big picture, long-term project. So I imagine surely you've both had moments where you've maybe reached your breaking point and you're like, I just can't do this anymore. Can you think of like an example of a time when that happened and like, how did you get through it? To inspire help our fellow old house owners who might want to throw in the towel sometimes.
Well, I think I want to throw in the towel every day. It's a work it's a work in progress. You know, my house isn't finished. I've been working on it for years. But I found out that I love doing it. It's never going to be complete. And I really, you know, when it gets overwhelming, I take a break from it, you know, and then I come back. But I just keep coming back, you know.
Or you call in friends and you say, I need to do this really exciting project. Can you come? What are you doing this weekend? I mean, we had a number of people come down to pull that siding off the house, and it was often the weekend, and that would have taken me 3 weeks at least.
Yes, the many hands make light work, right? So I think one of the big, this is for everyone. One of the big questions when you own an older house is like, do I try and DIY my way through this? You know, everyone's got various levels of skills from, you know, novice, beginner, nothing to, you know, maybe you grew up with like a parent who worked in the trades. So you've been doing it all your life. But like navigating this decision when you've got projects that you're facing in your house, like, do I DIY it or do I hire it out? Any advice for navigating that decision? And like what factors to consider? And then I guess specifically to Brad and Ellen, like is there anything you DIY that you wish in retrospect you had paid someone else to do?
I think the first consideration is, would it be illegal for me to do it myself? So right off the top, that's, you know, like you can't really install your own breaker box and you can't like run a line from the power line. So right away, like that's my first thing is, well, this really has to be done by a professional, and therefore I will call in a professional. I think the second consideration is the amount of funds that you have available and the time that you have available. And then thirdly is, I think, do you wish to develop a skill in this area? So, you know, like there may be jobs that need to be done that you just have no desire to ever do again, or purchase the equipment to do again, or spend the time uncovering, you know, even when you do something yourself, there's an incredible amount of research time watching. You can't just watch one YouTube video. You got to get at least 4 different perspectives. So you're watching like 4 different people do the same job to see where the overlap is, where they disagree with one another, investigate that. And, you know, that may not be worth it. But there are other jobs where it allows you to develop a skill, you know. So when we first started messing around with the windows, you know, like I started with a window that I didn't really care about, and like tried, and as we got around the house, the windows got better and better and better. And you know, then you have sort of a craft that you've developed, and that's worthwhile. And maybe windows aren't your thing, but you know, I don't know, stripping woodwork is, or whatever the case is. Find something that you think there's more to it than just the literal time invested.
Here, I'd like to say that there are some skills that I think are perfect for a do-it-yourselfer. And if you make a mess, as you improve, you can fix your mess. There are other skills that I think are beyond a do-it-yourself, or maybe roofing and flashing, and sometimes repointing masonry and things like that. This was not my house, but it was another person's old house. They just begged me to hang wallpaper one time. I said, I don't hang wallpaper, but you know how to. Yeah, I know how, but I don't hang wallpaper. And they kept on, and I went in and I hung their wallpaper, and a few months later I visited, and all the wallpaper was, the seams were popping up. It was rolling that from the top down, and they said, your wallpaper doesn't look good. I said, well, I told you I don't hang wallpaper. That's a true story, and there are other stories like it. I think you need to decide what your budget is, and if it's doable, try it, and if you hate it, then maybe hire it out. But I love to see people learning new skills, trying at least.
Megan or Ellen, anything to add to the DIY versus hiring it out decision process?
Well, I also think part of it has to do with like your time frame. Like how fast do you want it done? I'm not someone who needs everything done right this moment. As you might imagine, when you come by my house, if you look in the back, there's still a 10-foot section, 2 feet high, that I still haven't gotten to and needs to be scraped and painted. But, you know, if there's things that are timely that have to get done, it's best to get that professional in if you can afford it on your budget. Like right now, I have 2 window sashes that are sitting in my garage that I painted and scraped, and Steve has put glass in, but they're not in my window yet. And, you know, I'm like, okay, I need to put them in the jam before winter, right? You know, do I do it myself, or do I just say, hey, Steve, come on over, put the weather stripping and, you know, finish the window, hang it for me, you know? So it really depends, you know. I'm finding the problem with an old house is there, and I'm sure Brad felt this way, is that there's so many projects to juggle at once. You know, you're trying to get so many things done. So it really is, you know, do you have the money? What's the time frame? And can you find someone else to actually do it who you trust? Because if you're going to be following that person around, you might as well be doing it yourself.
Ellen's house has a tower, which she showed in all the pictures. And the siding is complicated as it joins at the corners. When you have a corner board, it's very easy to cut the siding and butt it into a corner board. But the way Ellen's siding terminates at the outside corners is a compound miter. And you might think that you could cut that compound miter once and say, okay, that's it. We'll do all the rest of them that way. But your house has settled for 150 years, and no, it doesn't work out that way. So the carpenter who did that beautiful job was Ted Robertson, Kirkwall Construction. And even he couldn't cut each piece to fit precisely. What he did is he had to cut a sample. For every corner board, he cut a sample, put it on there, this work or it doesn't work, and then he would cut the real piece. That was incredibly difficult work and took a lot of precision and skill. I just wanted to throw that out. And in terms of just throwing your hands up and giving up, I have to throw something else at Ellen again. It's a big house. I can't imagine what she's done to it all by herself. When she does have a helper. But the north side, which she doesn't see, she hired a painter to paint the north side because she doesn't have to see that work, which she does not approve of. Okay, yeah.
And there's nothing worse than paying someone to do a job, and then when you look at it, you're like, I could have done that better. And particularly if you're so irritated by it that you wind up doing it over yourself. Now you've out the money and the time, and you're incredibly frustrated because you've done double time. I just had somebody here, simple like P-trap change, and I thought, you know, I could do this, but it will take me 14 trips to Home Depot. I just know that it will. And I'm just going to hire this person, and it's going to be done, and it's going to cost me a little more than I want to pay. But you know what? I'm at a point in my life now where I'm just going to do that. And then he did a bad job. And then I had to then take it apart, and I paid him and took 14 trips to Home Depot and then redid it myself. Like that is the worst. Like that's worse than like having a miserable DIY experience, because at least you're happy with the end.
Yeah, I would jump in here to Brad's point too, is that's kind of the DIY or hire out, is realizing that it's also really important, if you are going to hire it out, to be working with people who know what they're doing. I think Steve kind of touched on this too. You know, there is a difference in working with kind of modern materials, modern woodworking, things like that, and working with historic materials and historic buildings. So I think that's another reason, if you're going to hire it out, I think everyone whose faces you see on this screen right now would definitely recommend working with someone who has knowledge and experience working with historic buildings and has done similar projects before. Yes, it's probably going to cost you a little more to hire the right person, depending on what the job is. But it's worth it in the end, because the work will usually should be done correctly. So just keep that in mind, that even if you're hiring out, it's important to be looking for people who really know what they're doing with historic buildings. I would say, especially if you're talking about masonry, you want to be really careful with masons. I'm working with one at my own house to have my 1940s chimney has to be slightly rebuilt, and it needs some repointing done. And the contractor that we met with first isn't necessarily known for working on historic buildings, but we are looking to maybe save a little money. And when they handed us their quote, what they were going to use was Portland cement, which you don't want on your historic brick. And so that told me right away. Luckily, I work in the field, so that put up a red flag for me that we can't have that done. So just keeping that in mind, and to echo the others, DIY or hire it out, it really depends on your budget and also how much do you want to do. I know right now my husband and I desperately need our hardwood floors refinished in our house, and that is something I've done before in other houses. I'm completely capable of doing it, but it's hard work. And we have hardwood floors throughout our entire house. I don't want to do it. It's just something we've decided that we will let someone else who can come in, do it quick. We don't have to live around it, and have it done. So all things to consider.
I will say that a middle road approach can be to find a contractor who is willing to learn. And if you are willing to put the time and effort into getting the research part done, and then hire an individual who, honestly doesn't know, and you're able to say, okay, we're going to do this, and this is the way it's going to be, and this is how I want it, and are you willing to play by my rules and not think I'm annoying? Then we have a deal. And so a lot of times in that atmosphere, you can get a little bit of the best of both worlds. You're kind of DIYing it because you're really managing that project, but you're not physically doing it. You can usually get someone for a lower price because usually this individual is less experienced if you're willing to deal with some minor imperfections. And that was something that did work for me at the cottage. Like, I wound up working with an Amish gentleman who came out, and he was pretty young, and he had tools and could do labor and worked hard all day. And I'm like, okay, so this is what we're going to do. And this is exactly the way that I want you to do it. And he was willing to play along. And I think that was a really good middle ground.
So one of our audience questions is, and I think the book answers this question, but maybe Steve, if you can provide kind of a quick answer, is do you have advice about how to prioritize jobs with an old house? For example, if a lot of things need to happen but can't afford to do it all at once, how do you start, and what can wait? And any quick advice you might have about talking to contractors and what to ask them when you're interviewing?
When you prioritize, you should prioritize the outside structural issues and the roof. So that would be in defects in the structure, the roof and the foundation. You should prioritize that over any aesthetics that you're thinking about, because if your house has good bones and a good roof, then you can put all those other work items off for a long time before you start. That's first. And what was the second part of your question?
Tips for interviewing contractors.
Well, you should always get 3 estimates. They should always be people who do the kind of work that you're looking for. And ideally, you'd have some sort of, even though brief, some sort of specifications, so that when you get estimates, you're getting what we say are comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. Okay. You need, if all 3 estimates offer different work items, and they're all a different price, it's pretty hard to compare the estimates fairly. Okay.
So this is a little bit of a complicated question, and also somewhat addressed in the book. There's a question from our audience. Is there a chapter on insulation and how to insulate a 19th century house? I have a mid-19th century story and a half Greek revival farmhouse. Particularly interested in how to inflate the sloped roof area where the rafters are lightweight and undersized, so no room to both insulate and have a baffled airspace.
Well, we tell you what materials are are useful, viable. We tell you the materials maybe you shouldn't use. But at the end of that chapter, yes, there is a chapter. But at the end of that chapter, there is a book recommended by Fine Home Building that covers everything. Okay. So we send you to an authoritative source.
Next question. You mentioned gutters. What is the thought on installing gutters on a 200-year-old home?
Well, a 200-year-old home would not likely have a hung gutter. It probably would have had some sort of built-in gutter, maybe what's called a pole gutter, or maybe no gutters at all. Okay. I think since we all have basements in this climate, that gutters are useful for taking water away from the foundation and the basement areas. And ideally, then we would on a house that age, you put a half round gutter. It would look more appropriate. But we talk about gutters. It's also it's distracting to put a K-style gutter on a 200-year-old house. So that's why I say a half round gutter.
A question for Ellen. I understand you live in a historic district. How do you go about obtaining approvals for the work you're doing on your house? Did you present your overall plan to the City of Rochester Preservation Board, or did you do it on a piecemeal, like project by project basis? Or did none of the work require Preservation Board approval?
So none of the work I did to my house required going to the Preservation Board because I didn't change anything on the outside. I replaced asphalt roof that was already asphalt. And I've been doing restoration of windows and restoration of the siding. If I was trying to replace the windows or put in, say, aluminum storm windows instead of having my wood storm windows and wood screens, then I would have to go before the Preservation Board and ask to be allowed to make those changes. So everything I'm doing is just to maintain what has been there for all those years.
Ellen,
Oh, go ahead.
you did the credit program, correct? So you would
Yes.
have gotten pre-approval for the work that you wanted to receive credits for.
Yes, I did. I been working with them for, I guess, the last more than 10 years. And
which is an easy and straightforward process.
It is. Once you understand what it is that it takes, it's basically take photos and show the work that you're going to do, and then take photos of what you did and send that in to get a credit by the end of the year.
And that's an important distinction for folks to understand. So there's two different types of historic districts. There's a National Register historic district, which doesn't come with any kind of restrictions or design review. But if you're in a National Register historic district, or you're individually listed in the National Register, that's what allows you to access this state homeowner tax credit program that Ellen was just talking about. Now, you may also be in a locally designated preservation district or conservation district or historic district. The terminology varies across the state. And that's a locally designated area that's designated as part of your local municipality's zoning code. And that if you're in that kind of a district, that's where you get into design review through a local municipal body, such as a preservation commission. So important to understand the difference between those two programs. So we've got just about 3 minutes left. So a question for each of our panelists. What is one, like your best nugget or piece of advice for an old house owner, whether they're DIYing or hiring it out or a combo of both? What's your little nugget of wisdom to share with folks?
I say live in the house for 1 year before you start anything. Other than like leaky roofs or things like that. Live in the house 1 year.
I think I would say that really be sure if you're working with someone and paying a contractor that you understand, that you both understand what the work is that is actually going to be done, because you have an assumption in your head of what it's going to look like, but if they don't work on old homes regularly, they might not really understand what it is that you are requesting. So better communication and better understanding between the two of you of what the work is going to be.
I would say take cues from your house. So allow the style and the construction manner of your house to give cues to you about how to proceed with your renovation. Go crazy with paint colors, go crazy with wallpapers, do all of those superficial things that you want to do that are not going to impact or negate the style of your house. But if you have a Tudor, then play nice with Tudor. If you have a colonial, play nice with Tudor or with colonial. Doesn't mean you have to have traditional paint colors and wallpapers, but don't do something to the house that will make it feel confused.
Megan, what about you? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, I would agree with what everyone else has been saying. And Steve pointed out, live in the house for a little while before you make your decisions. But I think, when it comes to changes you might want to make, well, I'm a preservationist. So of course I love the historic materials and layout and those types of things to be retained. We also realize you have to be able to live in your home in the 21st century. So, really think about what are some of those changes, what is some of the work that you can do to your property without completely obliterating what makes it historic and significant. So, if you own a home that's in a historic district in the National Register Historic District, or is in a local district and has that designation, it's for a reason and it's special. So, you want to make sure you're not doing things that would kind of impede that special, unique character of your home. So I think that would be my main thing, is take a look at what makes your house unique and what makes your house your own, and try to love that about it.
And then Steve, I'll give you the last word. We had a question about where folks can get the one of your other publications, the Window Sash Bible. So can you just give a plug for where folks can get your other resources?
Oh, my other books are available on Amazon, or they're available through me at windowsashbible.com. Okay.
Great. And I put the link in the chat. You can get your own copy of the Historic House Handbook on the Landmark Society's website. I want to thank our panelists, Ellen, Steve, Brad, Megan, for joining us and sharing your expertise. Definitely go out and get your copy of the Historic House Handbook. And like Steve said, makes a great gift. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Steve, did you have one other thing you wanted to add?
Historic House Parts is also selling the book. Okay.
So if you're in the Rochester area, Historic House Parts, another place where you can pick up the book in person. And again, we'll have the recording available on YouTube if you know anyone else who wasn't able to make it tonight and you'd like for them to tune in.
Thanks
so much, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.